morning. This is Gordon Graham in Seattle.
Good morning. This is R.J. McCatton over at Inventive Productions down in Bend, Oregon this week, and it's a little bit rainy, and it's on a Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, so it's time for Tuesdays with Gordy, the weekly conversation with the Godfather of Change, Gordon Graham. How are things going for you, Gordy?
Well, we're getting ready to change our living arrangements here, so that's taken a little bit of time, which is always challenging. We was at a Christmas party last night. It's coming up to the holidays, and parties start being a big thing. And we went out to Diane Tice's house, and I met a lot of people I hadn't seen for a while, and it was great to kind of reacquaint ourselves with some of the people from back in the past, and you know, everything is going along fairly decent. How about yourself?
Oh, things are going good. That's getting closer and closer to the holidays and Christmas, and it brings back a lot of memories of being a kid at Christmas time. Christmas is a big thing for families. You know, it's also good for the economy. Black Friday, and everybody's out shopping and for Christmas presents, and people are putting Christmas lights up, and it's a joyous time of the year.
Yeah, it is. It's a great time for families, and I used to really love it when I had little kids, because there's nothing like seeing their eyes light up on Christmas morning when they come down and the tree is all lit up and presents under it, and Santa Claus has showed up, so they get very, very excited. So we're past that stage, but every once in a while we get a chance to get down with our grandkids, but Christmas is a great time for youngsters.
I remember
sometimes being a kid is not a bad thing, even when you're a little older.
I remember being one of those kids sitting there waiting until the clock said it was okay to get up in the morning.
Yeah. That's a great time. We had a chance to reacquaint ourselves with a bunch of people last night, and Diane Tice is still keeping the company alive, and the information that impacted my life 40 years ago is still available out there. Kat Crossland from Instar Performance, who is my partner, and she's back in New York right now visiting the prison system back there that use a program called Breaking Barriers that is designed to help men and women caught up in the criminal justice system readjust and redirect their lives in a positive way. And that program was a result of going through a seminar taught by Lou Tice 40 years ago, and I made a commitment at that time to get the information that impacted my life, to get it into prisons across the country. And over these many, many, many years, I don't know how many prisons across the United States uses this curriculum, Breaking Barriers and Framework for Recovery, but New York, California, Virginia, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, states all over the country and prisons. And so it's been a journey over these years, but that's been my commitment. When I went through this information 40 years ago, I made a commitment to get this information into prisons where there was a lot of people just like me that wanted to change their lives but didn't know how. And the information that I learned from Lou Tice at that time, really structured to make it relative to the challenges that men and women face in prisons, has impacted thousands of lives over these many, many, many years.
Thinking about Christmas, what was it like for you years ago when you had Christmas inside a maximum security prison? What was it like for you?
That's probably one of the toughest times in the year for men and women in prison, because it really impacts you in terms of what you've given up by the things that put you in prison, and how much you miss the families and the parties and all that kind of stuff. So it's a very challenging time in prisons, and one of the organizations that used to really be important at that time was I think it was St. Vincent de Paul. They would come into the prisons with a little bag of candy and an apple and pass that out to all the inmates. And so there were a lot of guys, men in the joint, the prison, that didn't have families. And so it was really an occasion that and I've always thought a lot about things that St. Vincent de Paul does, because they were very important in terms of that part of my life when I was in those places. And they were one of the few organizations that came in and did something to kind of help brighten that day for the men that were in that place. And I was over there not recently, and B.J. Ray, the warden that had been him and I did 17 years together. He was the warden, and I was in there, and he passed away, and I was over at his memorial, a couple of months ago, and or maybe it just been maybe a month ago, but his daughters came and asked me would I come over and speak at that memorial, which was really an honor for me. But that Christmas always brings back lots and lots of memories, and the parties, and so it's a special time of year.
Do kids, grandkids, and kids ever ask you about those days much?
Oh, my kids, yeah, we all sit and I've talked to them about it. I've written a couple of books, and they've read the books, and my oldest daughter, Tamburina, or Tammy is her, but she would come up with her mom and visit me when I was in the prison at the last part of my prison experience, and Tina was just a little teeny baby at that time, but Janie would bring her up there, and so I've had men that have gotten out of prisons that I've had come and stay in my house and until they get their feet on the ground, and so they've all been involved in that part of my life, and I think it's been valuable for them to learn those kind of experiences that really let you know how blessed you are to have the kind of freedoms that we have as individuals, and the kind of opportunities that are presented to individuals who take control of their own lives.
Lou Tice, you've mentioned several times that Lou was an instrumental person that helped catalyze your change in your life. And do you remember the first time you ever saw him, and what did he look like, and what was your first impression?
Well, I was very skeptical. I was a professional fighter and boxer, and I was at the gym, and a couple of people, fight promoters and trainers, had suggested I meet with this guy that taught these seminars. I didn't know what the heck a seminar was. I thought it was one of them touchy-feely things where you go out in the country and hug each other and cry and go back and get back into work. But anyway, they convinced me to go through this seminar up at a little resort called Port Ludlow. And when I went up there, all of the people in there were business leaders and professional athletes and coaches, and I thought, what the heck am I doing here? But he started teaching this curriculum, cognitive skills, thinking skills, and it just really opened my eyes to some information that I could use to change the way that I managed my life. And my commitment at that time, when I come out of that seminar, was to get this information into prisons, because I knew there was a lot of people just like me that wanted to change but didn't have a clue how to take control of their lives. And so over these years, I've had a chance to get the information into prisons all over the country, and we've produced 2 programs that are focused on that population, one called Breaking Barriers and another one called Framework for Recovery. And Kathy Crossland now, a partner of mine, has kind of taken the lead on implementing those things, and And it's a curriculum that really helps people recognize how to manage their lives, and it's really the same information that's in Framework for Change that's used in corporations and agencies and communities across the country. It's just basic common sense, but common sense is not that common.
I know with your background of being a convict for so many years, and you were able to change your life, and now you've taken the message out across the world to military organizations, corporations, cities, all different kinds of people have been involved with your story, and you're telling your story out there in speeches and workshops and videotapes, and even a lot of famous sports personalities have been going through the program. I saw Pete Carroll, the guy who's the football coach for the Seattle Seahawks, has been through the program, and the coaches of the Olympics. People, everybody wants to change something in their life, whether it's their weight or their job or their attitudes or their just something in their life. What is the simple things that made a difference for you that were able to change your life? What was it if you were going to put it in a nutshell?
Well, basically, there's 4 barriers to change. I don't care whether you're 80 years old or you're 20 years old or 15 years old trying to get your life together. There's 4 basic barriers that keep us from accomplishing the things that we want to accomplish within our own physical limitations, obviously. But the first is preconditioned cultural beliefs, that we wind up believing a lot of things that really are not accurate in terms of our own ability to achieve things. So preconditioned cultural beliefs is a major barrier. So when I go back into prisons, a lot of people in prisons believe that they can't get a job, that they can't change their lives, that they can't stop using drugs or whatever it is. But that belief has a tendency to really be a barrier to changing the way that you want to live your life. And the second is habits. We get habituated. And in prisons, you develop habits that are relative to maybe the prison environment, but that they don't fit outside. Habits. One of the habits that I have that I've acquired and always have had this habit, I think, is I'm always on time. I always follow through on my commitments. Those kind of habits help you achieve the things that you want to achieve. And I have a habit of treating all people with dignity and respect. Those things start out as a conscious process of thought. Then through repetition and repetition and repetition, they become just a way of life. So we get habituated. And I don't know many people that don't have, that if they're successful, they have great habits that allow them to achieve the things that they've achieved in their lives. So we get habituated. Another major barrier to change is attitudes. We develop all kinds of attitudes about people and foods and activities. And it's amazing to me that in 2012, we've still got attitudes that affect the way that we deal with other people. Racial and gender and all kinds of attitudes that affect people's opportunities to achieve all that they can achieve. And so those attitudes become a major barrier to change. So preconditioned cultural beliefs is a major barrier. Habits is a barrier, and all them things, when they're reversed, can be great accomplishments to achieving what we want to achieve in our lives. Attitudes. And then the fourth that I think is worth exploring sometimes when you look at your life is expectations. We don't get what we want in our lives. We get what we expect. Now, if what you want and what you expect is the same, then you're going to be pretty successful. But a lot of people don't expect to achieve. They don't expect to make the sale. They don't expect to be on time. So that expectation becomes a major barrier to change. So habits, attitudes, beliefs, and expectations. And when I learned that, 40 years ago, for me, it was a major revelation that allowed me to change the direction of my life. And I think that a lot of people who have good, strong families and and are raised in certain kind of environments, they grow up with those kind of things internalized. But people who grow up in certain environments, they grow up with habits that really keep them from achieving what they want to achieve. And their expectations really don't match with what they want. And so I think that just those basic common sense things really help me. And I've been involved in prisons for the last 40 years, taking this information back into prisons. And I also work with, corporations and agencies and companies across the country. I've had a chance to do things. I've taught the Combined Armed Forces Command Staff in Korea, up at the DMZ, and I've worked with corporations and agencies, and everybody that I work with knows my background. One of the things that I think is essential, that people need to be authentic. You don't need to try to be something you're not. Just be the best you that you can be. But authenticity is a real quality of people who are high achievers.
Gordy, I was watching they had an interview a couple days ago with the former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson, and they were talking about Lindsay Lohan, a movie star who's been going through in and out of jail and in trouble all the time. And they asked Mike Tyson about her situation and if he had any advice, and it was interesting. He said that change is an inside job. So
yeah.
I wonder if he got that from watching one of your tapes. I'm thinking.
Well, I wrote a book called "Change is an Inside Job," and it's basically the internal habits and attitudes and beliefs and expectations. So change is really an inside job. It's pretty, it's pretty basic. But obviously, a lot of people in my life have given me a hand up. I've had a lot of opportunities to participate in things that most people with my background don't get a chance to do. But I know that if you read, there's all kinds of books that help give you ideas on how to more effectively manage your life. And there's some things, like when I go into prisons and talk to men and women in prisons, one of the things that, common sense is important. But if you ask people, how many of you know what put you in prison, most everybody raises their hands. And so I just suggest that if you stop doing the things that get you arrested, they will stop arresting you. It's not rocket science, but there's certain things you just got to stop doing. Some people can't use alcohol. It causes problems for them. So if you stop using alcohol, the problems will disappear. There's just certain things that are common sense. And obviously, it was something that I learned over the hard way. I mean, I was in and out of prisons. I was 17 years in prison. I escaped a couple of times, been shot, been involved in riots, and so I have a background that's a wee bit different than people that are doing the kind of things that I've had an opportunity to do. But change is really an inside job.
I know the first time I ever saw you, it was part of a sales organization that you had been in the area, so they asked you if you could talk to the sales team. And when I first went there, I was going, why are we listening to a guy like you as a salesperson? But your concepts about changing things and about your attitudes and habits can be applied to anybody almost, whether it's a salesperson or a teenager that's dealing with drugs or family issues, a company trying to build their culture. And I noticed that you've had a lot of impact on even little cities like in East Palo Alto, which was a murder capital of the United States, and you and your concepts were able to help turn that around. It's interesting how the same concepts can be used it's sort of a universal themes.
Well, it's basically the same concepts. They just apply differently in people's lives. But habits, attitudes, beliefs, and expectations. But in East Palo Alto, I had an opportunity to do some things down there years and years ago, but I had a lot of help. David Lewis, who was a former Black Guerrilla Gang leader, became a great friend of mine, and he was one of the people that had planted the mines in East Palo Alto, and he got involved with me. There was a woman who was out of New York, Sharifa Wilson, who was the mayor of East Palo Alto at that time, and she really stepped up and put in a lot of effort. So it wasn't just me. I mean, there was a whole bunch of people that stepped up and started helping me. There was a guy named Big Willie who was out of Soledad, or one of them prisons in California, that was involved, and Luther and Patrick Brock, and so I don't think anybody does things by themselves. You get a lot of assistance, and people step up and recognize that this is the right thing to do. So, it's been a really great ride for me, but change is an inside job.
Hi, Holly. How are you?
Holly, how are you?
How are you? I'm listening. Go ahead.
I'm pretty dang good. Go ahead, RJ.
I remember as a salesperson, your concepts of the first thing you did is you started asking people how many of you are a father or a son or a brother or a sister or mother, and everybody's hands started going up, and there's sort of a commonality that we're humans. And as a salesperson, you talk about beliefs, how salespeople they prejudge people. They get a belief about a certain type of gender or a race, or a type of person. If he's an engineer, you get an attitude that person's going to have a different way of looking at buying something, and then how our attitudes really control the way we think, and then the expectations, the visualization part of it really was impactful for me. How you don't get what you think about. Really, it's what you expect you're going to get. So it really does apply to things like sales.
Well, one of the things that I learned many years ago is that when you practice something in your mind and you visualize the end result, you can gradually and incrementally take away the stress and the anxiety of maybe speaking in front of a group of people or making a sale to an individual. But you also probably should apply the same concepts in your relationship and in your family life, because practice makes perfect. And so when you practice things in your mind, it begins to apply in the outer world that you live in. So that was one of the real key tools that I began to use many years ago, is I call it deliberate preparation for a predetermined outcome. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is going to work perfectly for you, that you're dealing with human beings who have over time, developed all kinds of attitudes about what you can do and what you can't do, and they have all kinds of barriers that keep them from maybe participating in things that would help improve the community that they're a part of. And so you got to have a lot of tenacity. You've got to be able to stick with it long enough for it to become a major part of people's lives. But you just keep going going at it day after day, and gradually people begin to recognize that this is going to maybe improve the world that they live in. Because all of us, I think, myself included, we're all resistive to change. Change is a challenge, and even my wife and I are just about ready to go through a change of places that we live. We're moving into a different community, one of those communities that are for older people, even though I'm not old, but so trying to figure out, how to downsize your house or things like that can just be a tremendous challenge for individuals, including myself and my wife. So change isn't easy, But when you wind up recognizing that change is keeping you from doing what you want to do, or maybe that's keeping you in a prison, or that's keeping you from maybe socializing with people that don't look like you, change can be a real challenge for people.
I know this last week, one of my big heroes, Zig Ziglar, passed away. And I remember my dad had given me a set of tapes, of Zig Ziglar tapes, and I noticed that for me, that in sales, people go through cycles and they get into slumps where, even though you're really successful, all of a sudden you find out a flat spot where you can't give it away. But I found by listening to the tapes, it helped keep my mind up, and I would be able to go through and not have those slumps anymore. So what you feed into your mind is really important, and all the things you're talking about, the visualization and affirmations, is basically all part of it. You basically help program your mind to overcome these kind of obstacles.
Well, we move towards what we think about. And the one thing that we have control over as individuals is what we think about. So if all you think about is problems, your life is probably going to be pretty darn challenging. So, you move towards and become like that which you think about most of the time. And I have a tendency, like all of us, to get into a process sometimes of thinking about things that I don't want, but I don't stay there very long. I recognize that I can bring into my life what I want if I continue to focus on it. And that doesn't mean that you focus on hitting the lottery, you're going to hit it. But the night before the lottery comes out, you can at least live the fact that you're going to have a chance to win it.
Now, do you remember the first time you met Holly?
That was way back in the day. Holly, I can't, it's hard for me to remember. Mark and Holly worked with me for a number of years, and they've been friends of mine forever. But Mark and Holly were just really a big part of my early journey. They were great friends, and we had a lot of fun together. And Jeff and their little daughter, they were really, really important people to me. And Mark worked with me at the University of Washington when I ran a program there for men and women coming out of prisons in the Minority Affairs Department at the University of Washington. And so, over those years, you go back, and there's so many experiences that were unique and had maybe never been done before that it's hard to, capture them all. But Mark and Holly were really important to me at that point in my life.
Do you remember, Holly, what was your first impression of Gordy Graham when you first met him?
Well, we met Gordy Graham when we went to that first Pacific Institute seminar, and as I like to tell Gordy and Eve many times, when we went to that seminar, Mark was just getting out of the University of Washington, and I had just gone to work for John Meisenbaugh, and I told him we were going to go to the seminar to meet very important, wealthy people. We were going to network, and that's what we were going to do there. So the first thing we do, we get seated next to this person that looks like he's an ex-boxer. And Mr. Plackett thinks these are interesting people, and I explained to him, honey, there's bankers over there that you need to meet, and there's other very important people here. I don't think we need to talk to this. He looks like he's an ex-boxer, Mark. Gracious. So anyway, as it turned out, he was the most interesting person there, he and Janie, and it was a fabulous weekend, and we've been friends ever since. But, you cannot judge a book by its cover. And as it turned out, he was an ex-boxer, but, a fascinating person besides that.
I remember over the years, I brought in quite a few different speakers to talk to my sales teams, but every single one of them said that the one that had the biggest impact on them, but the one they remembered the most was Gordy Graham. Because his style is so different than any other motivational speaker who comes and goes. Gordy's was totally a different style.
Well, yeah, and over the years, many times Gordy and Lou would do back-to-back events, and, Gordy's impact was as powerful as Lou's was, but they were different impacts. I mean, they captured different ideas, but they also could deal with all kinds of people through all walks of life. Their messages are very, very impactful. And Gordy, you're talking about authenticity today, which is very good.
Yep.
Because, one of our challenges in this quirky little town that we live in, is getting people to be direct and honest and deal with what is. And
yeah, it seems like people keep trying to be something they're not, and
yes.
It comes across.
Yes, and then they don't really see the real issues that need to be dealt with, or they
Absolutely.
don't see that there is an issue to be dealt with, and it makes it very difficult to solve challenges.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of tenacity, Holly, to keep hammering at it, and every once in a while you plant a seed, and gradually it begins to change the way a person approaches things. So it takes a lot of courage to keep hammering at it when you recognize that. How can you not see this? I mean, it's right in front of your eyes. If we continue to do what we're doing, we're not going to achieve what we want to achieve as a city or as an individual.
Right. And the other thing is you have to, do what Eve does so well. You have to be gracious about things. You have to repeat things over and over again without getting angry or getting people upset at you, but you still have to, keep making these teachable moments and then, kind of rattle their cages hopefully in a positive, way. So it was good to hear you today because Mark and I both needed to kind of hear about, keep at it. Don't get discouraged kind of thing. But, boy, I'll tell you, it's challenging.
The other night when I saw Mike Tyson interviewed, and he said that he's got actually a show in Vegas or on Broadway talking about a story, a one-man show. And he says that when he goes up on stage, he actually plays the role of Mike Tyson, that he's a different person now than the Mike Tyson that's in the show. And so I think a lot of people do. They put on some kind of a game face or a different kind of face when they go to work, or in front of different people, they might have a different face for different people.
Well, I heard part of Mike Tyson's interview with Piers Morgan on CNN the other night on the radio, and I was amazed. He is going around doing a one-man show about his restructuring of himself, and it's just amazing some of the things that he's talking about. Very much what Gordy talks about. He has really found himself, it sounds like, and restructured his approach to life. But the thing that his presentation is attracting is that he's just absolutely honest about all these rather awful things he's done in life.
It's funny, Holly. I watched that show on CNN, and they asked him what his opinion of Lindsay Lohan and her experiences, and he goes, "Well, change is an inside job."
Yeah.
And I think he probably did go through one of your programs, Gordy.
Well, you pick things up, and it's universal knowledge. And there's a little book called The Four Agreements, and if you just applied those four agreements to your life, things would work a little bit better for you. So everybody says this. The concepts are the same. People just restructure them different and talk about them in a different way. But when you apply things that are really authentic, they will have an impact on your life.
One thing that's been interesting with the internet and Facebook and Twitter and all that, one of the things that really took off the last couple of years is people are using quotations all the time now on Facebook or things like that. And it's interesting how people like Gandhi and Teddy Roosevelt and Einstein, they all were talking about the same concepts that you talk about, Gordy.
Yeah, they're just the application of them and the way that you present them. But the one thing that I think is important is that when you've got challenges, obviously there's all kinds of challenges in our lives, but the best thing we can do is come back to ourselves, back to our own self, and say, what can I do about it? And sometimes there's nothing we can do about it, so you just have to let it go and move on with your life. But you've got to come back to yourself and say, okay, what can I do about it? If the relationship is screwed up, obviously there's some things we can do about it, but other people have to play in that part. And sometimes when people want to be an ass, you just got to let them be an ass.
Right now we're going into the holiday season, and it's full speed right now. and for a lot of people, they are real happy about that. But it also, the holidays is known as one of the saddest times of the year for a lot of people. A lot of people get depressed around the holidays, and what can we do to help people that are feeling sad, and how do we help them, Gordy?
Well, I think you got to change your mind. You got to change your mind and recognize go back to yourself and say, look at all the blessings that we have in a country that's free as any country in the world probably, and all of the different opportunities that are with us, and look outside and look at the trees and go out and take a walk in the park. But it's so easy to get caught up in all of the things we don't have, and then you look at all the things that you do have. When you're really down and out, ask yourself, how many times have you went hungry? How many times have you had to sleep on the ground? How many times have you, look at all of the things that you have and not always focus on what you don't have. Obviously, all of us would probably like to be wealthy and have a big house and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at all of the things that are important to you, they're your family, they're your relationships, they're your opportunities to go out and enjoy the weather, to do the things that we really have the ability to do. And I think that we have a tendency to focus on what we don't have instead of what we do have.
Right now, the holidays is a pretty materialistic time, but it does sometimes bring out the good in people when people start thinking about giving.
I think that like gifts are nice, but just a nice little card with a little love in it, to send to somebody can be as important as a gift.
I had done I did a film called Ship of Miracles about the Korean War and a Christmas in 1950, and I interviewed a state senator from the state of Washington, Paul Shin, and he was an orphan who was left running the streets of Seoul during the war, and he talked about how he went like a week without food, and he remembered it happened a lot. And he goes, there's nothing, he'll never forget the feeling that he remembers being hungry. It's not like you're fasting because you want to lose some weight. It's when you don't have any food to eat. And he says he'll never forget that feeling.
Well, that's a diet plan that's not that appealing, really. But if you have never had to miss a meal, or you've never had to face any of these kind of challenges, you really don't have a heck of a lot of empathy for people that do. I think it's really challenging sometimes for someone who has never faced any kind of challenges. They've had it. They were born into wealth, and they've had wealth all their lives, and it's going in someplace and sitting down and having a hamburger really doesn't give you any awareness of what the hell that world looks like.
Well, we're coming up towards the end of our time again this week. We'd like to thank you for jumping on the call, Gordy. Do you have any kind of homework for us, something we should think about this week that you think might help us get through the next week and think about change?
Well, I think that, it's coming up to holiday season, and just kind of think about the people maybe that you haven't talked to for a while, and give them a call or send them an email. Reach out to somebody that you maybe have ignored, but it isn't about material things, but give a little bit of yourself to the kind of enjoyment that other people might not have at this point in their lives. And I'm going to get on the phone and call some of my family and my kids and grandkids, and that's a nice Christmas gift.
I know some people that don't talk to each other because they've had a fight or whatever for many, many years, and each one's trying to wait for the other one to reach out first, and it's always good to be the first one to reach out.
Well, I think that people don't recognize that this is the main event. This is not the semi-main. I mean, you got to get into your life and live it to the best of your ability, and holding grudges and being angry at somebody over something that is probably insignificant in the scope of life really is a waste of a lot of energy, and really takes away some of the joy.
Well, thanks a lot, Gordy, for jumping on the call. Thanks, Holly, and if there's anybody else out there on the call, we thank you for jumping in on the call. And we'd like to thank our sponsor this week, is Kathy Crosland, and the company is called Instar Performance. And if you go to instarperformance.com, you can see Gordy Graham in there. He's got tapes and videos and books, and you can actually book him to come to your company or your community to talk about whatever you want them to talk about, which is probably about change. And so we'd like to thank Kathy Crosland for sponsoring the show this week. And until next week, this is RJ. Thanks a lot, Gordy, and thanks a lot, Holly, and everybody else out there.
Have a great week.